Hi everybody, my name is Sarah Yakowanis, and in this video I'm going to show you how to make this paper iris. And everything in this video that you see is something that comes in my paper iris and paper tulips kit. So this is the iris that is going to be yielded from this kit, and all of the paper and wire and floral tape, everything that you need to make this exact flower is all included right in the kit, which you can get at foldedpetal.com. So let's get started. The first thing we're going to do is take out one of our iris petal sheets, and we're going to separate it on this cut line right here. And we're going to set aside the large petals for right now. And right now all we're going to do is fold along the fold line. And this is the only time that being really precise with one of my paper flower kits is I encourage, because the back and the front of these are kind of mirrored. The back gives you a little bit more wiggle room for when you cut, but the closer you can get it right on that fold line, the better your petals are going to come out. So we've got that all folded really carefully. Now we're going to cut out the first petals. And we just really want them to be rectangles right now. So I'm just going to cut right in between the petals, just like that. And now what we're going to do is open up our first petal, and we are going to measure it. So you want it to come pretty much to a little bit below the top of that petal. And I have a line in the detailed instructional booklet that shows you exactly how long you want that wire to be, but it really doesn't have to be exact. A little bit longer, a little bit shorter, and it's going to come out just fine. So I have that one cut out, and for this, for this flower, we want 9 of these, because each petal gets its own little wire embedded into it. So I have my set of 9 right there, which I'm going to just set right there. And now what we're going to do is we're going to put some glue onto this petal. And you want it to be a really thin layer of glue. If you go too thick with the glue, the water in the glue will react with the ink on the paper, and it kind of will create some like weird splotches and discoloration, and it'll kind of bleed some of those details that are in that petal. So we just wanted a really thin layer of glue, and I like to put a thin layer of glue on the other side, just at that very end, because that tip isn't going to get any adhesive if it doesn't get it now. So now what we're going to do is we'll take one of our wires, make sure it's pretty straight, and we're going to center it right on the petal, just like that. Now we're going to fold it over and smooth it out, just like that. And now we're going to set that aside to dry for about an hour. And I have some already done, which are still kind of, they've been drying for a while, but let's just say these are all 3 setting aside to dry for an hour. And now we're going to do the second petal, which is a similar size but different shape. And we're going to do the same thing with that one. So we're just going to take a thin amount of glue, get it really nice and evenly distributed. Just do a spot right there, just like that. Then we'll take one of our wires and center it. And now we're just going to flip it over and smooth it out, and then let that dry for, like I said, like an hour, 45 minutes. And I've actually found that by the time you start your first petals and get them all done, and then do the second petal and get those all done, and then get the large petal and get those all done, by the time your large petal is done, your small petals have been waiting for about 45 minutes, unless you're a lot faster than I am, and then it might And we have these all ready to go. So we're gonna set those right there. And now for the large petals. And these are the only petals that don't have like a really wide berth on the back. They're basically a carbon copy on the front and the back. And that's because they're bigger, so you don't need as much wiggle room because they already kind of come with their own wiggle room built right in for when you cut them out. Now we're just going to take a thin layer of glue just like before, and you actually don't have to do this side with this one because it's going to be big enough that the wire will be able to embed itself fully, just the way it is. So we're just going to do a thin layer. We're going to take our wire, and these aren't going to go all the way up to the top of the petal because they don't have to. They're just going to kind of, there's like a lavender part right there, and that's going to be totally fine. So now we're just going to fold it over, smooth it out, and allow that to dry for, you guessed it, an hour to 45 minutes. And we've got some already done right over here. And I'm going to set this glue aside for right now. And now we're going to cut out the petals. So we're going to start with these first petals, and I'm just going to do one of each so you can kind of get an idea of cutting them out, but it's pretty easy peasy. You're really just going to, and that wire got a little close to the edge, but that's okay because the stem part of these petals gets seen a lot less. And you really don't have to be super careful about cutting these out. The templates on all of my paper flower kits are meant to be more of a suggestion than a hard and fast rule, because in nature, no two petals are exactly the same. And the same should be true of the flowers that you create with your paper flower creations. They don't have to be all perfect. They just need to be generally that shape, but you can go, you know, you can play around with it. Don't stress out. Have fun with it. You know what I mean? And now we're going to cut out that second petal. And this one has a raggedy edge, so I like to just kind of zhuzh it a little bit by like going back and forth with my cut. And I always like to have the hand that's holding the petal drive, and I keep my scissors pretty much the same place. It's just helps you have a little bit more control over your cut, and that's a little too close, not close enough. So I'm just going to trim that little itty bitty piece of white. Now the big petal. And these flowers are, for how detailed and beautiful they really are pretty easy to make. There's just 9 petals, so it's not too big of a stretch. Peonies take 900 years because they have 1,000,000 petals. So I'm just gonna set these all aside. I have some already cut out right over here. So we've got 3 of the first petals, 3 of the second petals, and 3 of the third petals. And now we are going to take a piece of floral wire. This is the silver floral wire that comes with the kit. It's a little bit thicker. It's an 18 gauge wire that's not wrapped in anything. I like a nice plain wire to make the stem. And we're going to take floral tape. Now, if you've never worked with floral tape before, it is super duper weird. As you can see, it doesn't have any stick at all. And the very mild stick it does have is created by stretching it, and it really just wants to stick to itself and the paper that we use in these kits. So we're just going to take that and activate it by stretching it and then turning the wire simultaneously. So it's kind of like a your one hand is stretching and the other hand is twisting, just like that. And for this flower, I like 3 or 4 layers of floral tape, just to kind of thicken up the stem a lot. I'm like really obsessed with details. And the thing that bothers me most about paper flowers is when the stem is too thin. Gee whiz. It just kind of really brings you out of it. You can have the most realistic bloom, but then this skinny, teeny, tiny little stem. And it's like, that's not what that stem would have been like. It's much thicker. So we're just gonna pad that out a little bit with the floral tape. And now, we're gonna set that floral tape, I'll set it over here for right now. So now what we're gonna do is we're going to sculpt these petals. And it's really easy for the first one, and this is the one that you sculpt first, and the other 2 you sculpt after they're on the stem. But it's so easy, it's just a press that way and a press that way. And that's exactly the shape that you want it to be. So we're just gonna bend it that way and then bend it up, just like that. Perfect. That one's a little going in too much. There we go. Now we're gonna get our floral tape back out. I like to have a lot of slack on my floral tape, as you can see, because it's not gonna stick to anything, so you can really just pull it out. Now what we're gonna do is we're going to attach these petals to the stem, and we want them to be equidistant from each other, which sounds really scientific and hard, but it really isn't. And so we're just gonna secure that with a little bit of floral tape. And again, it's just the motion of stretching it to get it to really stick. We're gonna get that nice and straight, just like that. And we're gonna put in the other one. Give it a little bit of space, but it really doesn't need a ton because there isn't a lot of space on this wire. And don't worry if it ends up being nudged one way or the other, but it's totally fine. You can fix it. Like, that's a little too far apart, so we're just going to twist that, just like that. And now we're going to get that third one on there. Perfect. So that's the first petals done. Now we're going to add the second petals. And we're just going to go right in between the first 3. So that one's going to go right there. And so you don't have to watch me do all 3. I have one already done right here. So as you can see, the second petals are right in between the first petals, and they don't have to be perfect. Nothing ever has to be perfect. And now we're going to take our large petals and put them right on top of those second petals. Just like that. And so you do the same thing on all 3 of the sides. And I have that all ready. You can see those, kind of look at it from the top. You can see those petals on the inside too. And now we're going to sculpt the large and second petal all together. So now we're going to just curve it down, just like that. So we're going to get all 3 curved down. And then you just grab the top petal and push it up. Just like that. And this is coming along really nicely. The next step that we're going to do is the neck. The neck of an iris really it's really beautiful, and it has a lot of gradation and a lot of small details, and those details really just make this flower come alive. So the first thing we're going to do is separate these into the shapes of their like kind. So just like that. And now we're going to roll them. So I'm going to start with this first one. And basically we roll them because this paper has been flat its whole life. And it's going to be round for the rest of its life. So just kind of rolling it gives it a lot, it'll tear a lot less easily. And we're just telling it that it needs to be round now. So we're going to go around that way at first. And then instead of forcing it to be really tight all at once, I like to go back and forth a couple of times, because it's really going to make that paper know that it's round now. And see how much tighter I can get it the second way? It's just teaching those fibers how you want them to be. And you can go back and forth as many times as you want, but I think that looks pretty good. So I have all of the shapes rolled up and ready to go. So now all you have to do, oh, my space is getting a little messy. Let's set that aside for now too. Okay, so now we're going to just we're just going to cut out one of the shapes from each of the rolls. And you don't have to be perfect. And if you start putting them on the stem and you're like, oh, I wish that was a little bit smaller, just cut it down. It really won't make any difference at all. And you don't have to watch me cut out all of these. You get the idea, just one from each of the different shapes. And I have them all cut out right over here. So now we're going to start applying them to the stem. So we have these all ready to go. And you do have to kind of open up the petal a little bit so you have room to work. But you can push them right back down when you're all done. And then just add them to that stem. And you want it to be a little bit lower so that all this bulky part that was created with the tape and the petals and all that wire underneath there is going to be totally covered up, and it's going to just be a really elegant transition from this thick part to the more thin stem. And the cool part about these kits is that a lot of the detail that's going to really wow your friends when you show them the flowers that you make, so are going to really, they're already on the paper, so it's going to be like really impressive, but not as hard as having to hand paint each petal before you make it. So now I'm just going to, so see how that one kind of curves up in? And if you don't have a space to curve it in like that, you can just trim it and it'll be fine. You don't want it to go like, the neck pieces to go like up into the bloom too much. I like that one there. And I actually think that just with 3 is going to be a good cover. But if you end up using all of the shapes and you still have like white gaps, just go ahead and add more. You have plenty to do all the flowers in your kit. So don't feel like you have to be like, you know, stingy with them. Use as many as it takes to just cover that whole base of the bloom. And I really think these neck pieces just make this flower. A lot of times those kind of details get overlooked, but I overlook no detail. Okay, so the final step on that on the flower part, we're gonna push those down again, is a stem paper. And the stem paper comes in a really long, it comes in a really big sheet, and you just cut the stem papers out. And when you're cutting those out, just know that you can cut into the green as much as you'd like, but try to make sure no white is remaining. So I actually bent those down too quick. I'm opening them up again. So now we're going to, it's just a really simple thing. You just press it in and it sticks, because this tape, even though it has almost no stick at all, sticks to itself in this paper. So now we're going to just keep on covering it. Use a really gentle hand, because this paper can rip super duper easily. So I'm barely holding it on at all. I'm just kind of keeping that angle with this hand and then twirling it with the other hand. And this hand is doing the pressing into that tape as well. And I cut this stem down from the length that comes in the kit. The ones that come in the kit are going to be twice this length, but I cut it down because my light box is a little bit small, and it's really awkward to have a giant piece of floral wire with not a ton of space to work with. And that is that. How gorgeous is that? It has all of that detail that you'll find in nature, because I tore apart probably 2 or 3 dozen irises to really investigate what makes it tick. And then that's what allows me to create such a beautiful recreation, and what allows you to create it too. If you get the kit, you'll have all that detail, all of that thought already done for you. So you can just do the really fun part, which is making paper flowers, which is super fun. So as a final step, we are going to make a leaf for this, because leaves are important too. So the first thing we're going to do is, this is a full length of floral wire for the leaf, for the video purposes. And what we're going to do is we're going to just put 1 coat of floral tape on this wire. See what I mean? It's too big for this light box. And a fun thing I like to do, which is my obsessive eye for detail kind of going into overdrive, and you don't have to do this at all, but if you want to, make just a couple of inches past the wire. So the wire stops there, but I'm going to keep on going. Such a crazy small detail, but that's going to allow your the stem of this leaf to taper at the end, which they do. But you totally can skip that part. No one will notice. So we're gonna get our glue back out. And you guys should know that this paper desperately wants to curl. Once the glue hits it, it's gonna curl up. There's nothing you can do about it. I mean, I have occasionally toyed with taping it down to whatever surface I'm working on, but whatever, like it just as long as you have something covering it, like I have this brown paper covering my table right now, it will get glue on the table, so be careful, but and it is going to curl just about the second that glue hits it. It's just the nature of the paper. This is a lightweight vellum, which I think creates, especially when it's laminated, oh, it looks just like a leaf. It has the same kind of texture and weight and feel, but you have to deal with the annoying curling because it's gonna curl. So now we're just gonna take that, and a little bit opposite of the flowers, we're gonna position that wire to the unglued side just because the glued side is so unwieldy. And now we're just gonna fold that over and smooth it out. You can, because this paper is translucent, you can totally see the little bubbles. So I like to take a little bit of extra time to smooth that out, and it's gonna look just like a leaf when you're all done. So this needs to, because like I said, this really wants to curl, this paper, put it in a giant book for 24 hours. Like, no joke, 24 hours. I know it's like a pain and a bummer, but if you don't do it for 24 hours, it'll curl up, you know, the next day. Just because it really, that glue is pulling that paper in, and the moisture has something to do with it too. So this one has been in a book for 24 hours, and I'm just gonna cut it out. And I'm sorry the bottom of these leaves are so bulky. Just make sure they are underneath, like, you know, beyond the rim of the vase. Usually these leaves would be wrapped around that, that iris, but I like the freedom of kind of being able to place them and not have them be so attached to the iris. So that's why I made this kit the way it is, just like that. Look at how nice that looks. And now we're going to get our iris back out. And you can see how beautiful that all looks. We'll sculpt the leaf a little bit. Have it arch down. Maybe the sunlight's going that way, so it's going to go that way too. Look at that. The most realistic paper iris around. And it doesn't even take, it's not that much work to do. It's a lot of repeating steps, but it's a really fun project. And it's pretty easy to do. Well, thank you for joining me. Like I said, you can order this kit at foldedpetal.com or foldedpetal.etsy.com. And thanks for watching. Have a great day.